Good morning, everybody. And good morning, Chris. Look at your beautiful Christmas tree behind you.
That time of year.
It's that time of the year. I love it. I love it. I love it. So, well, welcome everybody to the last episode of the Disruptor Connection for 2020. And I'm really, really excited to have a very, very dear friend of mine, Chris McCarthy, joining us. And we're going to be sharing today on disrupting biases and having just a real conversation. And Chris, instead of me reading a big bio about you, what I'm going to do is allow you to just share a bit about who you are and what you are doing today in your career, because you've had a great career. So welcome, Chris, and share a little bit with the audience.
Yeah, thank you, Shawn. I'm really happy to be here. I'm sipping my coffee, so I'm slowly waking up in California. Again, my name's Chris McCarthy, and I am the Vice President of Strategy and Design at Hopelab, which is a social innovation lab whose purpose is to improve the health and well-being of teenagers and young adults. And in this organization, we bring together behavior change scientists, designers, and product people to really think creatively about solving some complex challenges that young people are facing and co-creating solutions with them. So I've been there for about almost 4 years now. Previous to that, I was at Kaiser Permanente for 20 years, helping build their innovation and design infrastructure at the national level, and co-led kind of a design SWAT team with a dear friend of mine, Christy Zuber, for many, many years. And then also founded and led an organization for many years called the Innovation Learning Network that connected many large care delivery systems, foundations, and design firms. If you try to add up all of those things, it makes me much older than I really am, because there's a lot of things that happen concurrently. All to say that I have lived this very interesting life where I have one foot in the space of really trying to create things and build them, and then one foot in the world of connecting those who try to do that. And so it's the 50,000 foot view and the 1 foot view. And sometimes I feel like I'm being pulled apart, but it's a very unique tightrope to be able to see and be in both those places at the same time.
Well, thanks so much, Chris, for sharing that. You know, you and I met because of the Innovation Learning Network several years ago when I worked for Humana and then Xavier, and you know, every moment with you has been definitely a ride and a roller coaster, and so much learning. Even yesterday, one of your famous things that you do at the end of events where you have us breathe and you read this reflection. Taking up that mantle. We do that almost in everything we do when we do events. We did that yesterday, and I was like, oh, that's about Chris. And then I was like, oh, and I get to talk to Chris tomorrow. So, you know, so the whole title of today is around disrupting biases. And, you know, so for those that are listening to, I forgot to say this at the beginning, I'll be monitoring the Q&A section, also the chat section, and already in there, Michael Harper looked at that. Chris is a badass. See, they're already sending accolades to Chris, then cheering Chris on here. You know, why is talking about these biases so important to you and to where we are really today in society and in the world?
Oh, you went right big right from the start. Yeah. There are many reasons, and I think we all can come up with our own version of this. But mainly, if you are in the space of trying to create things, you are already immediately biased by the entire life that you have lived. And to remember that the people that we are co-creating with have different lived experiences. And so it really is imperative to take moments, and with an S at the end, moments throughout an innovation life cycle, to just take a quick step back and do a check on what are the kinds of biases that are driving you. And before we go much further in the conversation, I think it's really important to establish that biases are not bad or good. So we need to break this, we need to break this paradigm that biases are always bad. Actually, biases in many instances allow you to navigate life very efficiently. And you don't always want to navigate life efficiently. So in some instances, biases help us, and in some instances, they're very unhelpful and dangerous. And if you're trying to build something, you may be going down the wrong path and creating something that is probably for you, but not for the people you're trying to create for. Yeah.
That's a great point to make, right? That, and I love that. I think we do believe that biases are a negative thing, but I love your approach and how you shared that with us. So then let's go a little bit deeper in that. Particularly, let's look at you in the Hopelab space, and even in the design space. How does biases actually play a role in design, in your opinion? Because we've all led those sessions, and many people that are watching live right now or that will watch this later have led those types of sessions. Why does biases even have to play a role in design?
Yeah. So, as I said a few minutes ago, you want to be sure that you are co-creating the best thing possible. And so at the highest level, it's really ensuring that you are removing yourself as the person being designed for, and ensuring that the people or population that you're co-creating with is truly in the center. If we click one level down, where biases can flip from being negative to being positive, is that you can legitimately use them to build something better, because they will expose things and redirect you to something that is maybe more efficacious, is more desirable, is more marketable. And I mean, the list can go on from there. So just here's a very simple example. So at Hopelab, we are co-creating a vaping cessation product right now for young people. And there's a framing bias that crept in very early on, which was, and just take a step back, a framing bias is when it's how you ask a question can determine the outcome, or how you phrase things can determine where you head. And there was a very simple question, which is, do you want to quit? Or are you ready to quit? And that's smoking or vaping. And what you end up with is a binary choice. You end up with yes or no. And just by asking that, you've already separated your population into two groups. But you could ask that question differently, which is, how do you feel about quitting? And that will give you many, many, many more types of ways into the challenge. So where this showed up for us is, if we chose the binary approach, we could have only focused on the people who said, I want to quit vaping. And so then we would have designed for that. But there's actually a group of people that don't want to quit, but they're not sure they want to smoke. And those are the people that are contemplating quitting. So the yes or no question would have tricked us and filtered those people out. So instead, we now have three groups. We have those who recently quit, those who want to quit, and those who are thinking about quitting. And that is, I think, a good example of a framing bias. And we need to, yes, no questions are sometimes appropriate, but are they tricking you and causing you to create things in ways that that's not what your intention was?
Love the story, and I love how you put it into a clear action right now. So let me flip that, because I think that's where you were sharing how it's really biases are impacting the work that you're doing today. Let's flip it to the other side. Where is it damaging even greater? I mean, and you gave some example there, but have you seen in your work either the Kaiser or the ILN or at Hopelab where it also can be very damaging too?
Yeah, definitely. So I'll give two examples and two different biases. So the first one I'll give is potential damage. And fortunately, we caught it, and you've heard this story before. But this has to do with a confirmation bias. And so we just put out a great product at Hopelab called Nod. It helps increase connection for young people in college. There's an epidemic in the world of loneliness in young people, and the pandemic is only making that worse. So we designed this great product. This was pre-pandemic. We ran a study, showed great efficacy, and then the pandemic came. And when the pandemic came, it revealed a confirmation bias that we didn't even realize we had. And that bias was, when we went into the start of this project, we thought, we believed that we needed to get young people off of their phones and into the real world. And in fact, I would say society was validating that. There was like this beating of the drum that technology is bad. We got to get young people off of technology and meeting. So we designed an app that helped you get a challenge to get off of your phone and start interacting. Well, the pandemic came and destroyed that entire point of view. That product would no longer work. So we pivoted hard. We created a digital, an online only version, so challenges to connect with people online. And then we created another product after that, which was hybrid. So you could choose online, in person, or both. What we realized was that there are legitimate young people who can't go out into the world. And so our original product would have excluded them. And that was unintentional, but it was a confirmation bias because it's something that we believed. We found all the evidence around us to support that. And yet that's not true. What is true is that there are some young people that cannot meet in person, and in fact are having vibrant online connections. Like there's Twitch communities, there's all kinds of communities that exist online where people are getting real connection. And so we now have a superior product because of it. We could have accidentally cut out people. So, a pandemic saved us on this one. I wouldn't want to wish another pandemic to save us again, but I think it's a good example of where a confirmation bias can really grab you. The second bias I'll talk about from my last work at Kaiser Permanente was the sunk costs bias. And this is the bias that as more and more money is poured into your project, it's harder and harder to let go. And in fact, you start thinking that you're going to succeed no matter what. My third project, this was way back in 2004. I had two big home runs in my first two big innovation projects at Kaiser Permanente. And this one was around bed management. And it was an expensive project. And I think a combination of still being young, inexperienced, and not fully embracing a learning culture where failure is a part of the fabric of an organization, I fell into the sunk cost fallacy. And we went to the very end, even from the beginning, there were indicators that this was not going to work. And so, but it was a sunk cost bias. And it was a learning culture bias that I couldn't stop or pivot. And it was probably the best project, one of my best early projects. I learned more from that project than the two previous big successes, because I learned that I needed to embrace learning culture and I had to pay attention to sunk costs. And I say it all the time now at Hopelab, like, is this a sunk cost bias that we are in right now? Why are we afraid to say stop or pivot? And those are hard words, even for the most advanced innovators.
Yeah, and I'll share. I remember one of mine, Chris, when I was at Walt Disney and as a Disney Imagineer, and we were on a project that now cost several hundred millions of dollars to do. But I remember being probably $8 to $10 million into this project, which, people are like, it's Disney, that's not much money, but still it's $8 or $10 million, right? And that $8 to $10 million, I remember waking up one morning and going, I have to go in, like, in a cold sweat, like, I have to go talk to the CEO and the CFO and tell them we have to pivot this project. And we have all of that money. And I remember, like, shaking in fear of what I was going to do. But it was the best decision we made, and the product that's come out and that's people use every day now at Disney is amazing. But to get past that bias, and I never looked at it that way. So as you were talking about that, I was like, holy cow, what about this one? And what about this one? Right. And I guess when you were talking there, what made you personally, something inside of you drove you to really study biases? What, we've talked about that it's important, but there's something as a, we just wrote a book that's going to come out that we just got this week, and it's around shifting mindsets to heart sets. And we have a lot of innovation mindsets, but this is a deep for you, and it feels like, to me, it's a heart set in you. Why personally? It's more than just talking about biases, but I've seen you live this. Why is it so important to you, and what's driving you? What's the drive in this?
Yeah, so it's probably one of the most insidious of the biases, which is the implicit bias, and that is where we intentionally or unintentionally stereotype the people we're working with. And I have seen in my career where my own implicit biases on racism, on ageism, on low incomeisms, all of these can express themselves very easily and unintentionally. I distinctly remember in many projects over the years where somebody will make a statement like, our seniors just don't understand technology, and a lot of head shaking around the table or around the room. I've seen people talk about our low-income citizens as not being able to afford technology or not having technology in their hands. And those are all implicit biases. Those are all based on stereotypes. And I often equally find that it is the same groups of people who are trying to do good and trying to solve complex challenges. And so I think this one in particular is the one that we need to pay attention to the most, because it is the hardest to detect because it can be so nuanced. So for me, it's really about who are we trying to serve, and are we really bringing kind of a really clear-eyed point of view, or are we allowing the past and our own cultures to inhibit us from doing the most good that we can? I think this is the one that really kind of woke me up to biases in general. And once you start waking up to biases, you'll see them everywhere. It's actually quite annoying. And there's a crazy graphic that details over 100 different biases. And the psychological world has done a lot of work on this. You don't need to know about 100 biases. There are probably a handful that are important to your work. And throwing those checks and those stops throughout your work, I just think is a great practice so that you can do the most good.
Thanks for sharing that. We're getting lots of questions now, and I'm gonna let those filter in some, because what I'm gonna ask now is, and I can't shy away from this. How do you feel biases and biases are happening today in society, in the political structure we're in, and everything we're dealing with? Do you think that there's a threat of them that could be affecting what we do in society and how we're acting?
Ooh, my goodness.
Drink more coffee.
I mean, yes, period. This is also, I think, part of the great, unfortunately, the cultural divide in this nation. Just even watching any of the news channels, you will see these biases completely manifest in every way. So, there's many on one side of the political spectrum who insists that there is no racism, systemic racism in this country. And I will say that they are probably falling for the confirmation bias. They are looking around them and seeing micro examples of no racism, and they're just scaling that up to the whole nation. So if I personally can't detect a racist thing around me, then therefore we are not. It is not systemic. So I think that's. And then on the other side of the spectrum, it's the same thing. We're projecting all kinds of things on the other side, and so these implicit biases, these confirmation biases, these framing biases are present in all of the political things you're seeing going down right now, and all the policies that get passed and how they get compromised. All of those compromises are weaving in the biases into the solutions. And I think there's a lot of really smart people who are trying very hard to throw the checks up, to throw the momentary stops, and like, are we really doing the most good we can? And are we finding the right kind of compromise? But it is pervasive. But again, to the start of this, as we talked about, biases are not good or bad. I think we need to say it's okay to explore them and not beat ourselves up, because they do help us navigate quickly. But we always also need to take a moment and say, do we need to navigate quickly? Do we? And if we don't have to, maybe we need to take a step back and check where we're actually headed.
Thank you. I knew that was a hard question. And and one of our dear friends, this is going to lead into this, one of our dear friends, Chris, Zaina, she wrote here, she says, I find in healthcare a version of bias is not at all nuisance. It is our inability to do what the consumer world does well, which is segment and microsegment people who we are designing for. So we are reductionists in healthcare. We want there to be a segment of one, and we've experienced that, so that our lives can be easier, which means everyone gets what works for the average, and therefore no one needs to get medium or above. So do you agree that if we taught healthcare people how to do segmentation, what might overcome a lot of the biases in healthcare, and why it would overcome? Do you believe that would help?
Yes, and I think so when we say healthcare, even just saying healthcare is a massive problem, because if you look to most product firms who are doing segmentation really well, they're approaching this usually from a product perspective. And how can we differentiate our offering? But when we roll, so this is a cluster bias. When we roll everything up to just healthcare, it becomes overwhelming to try to figure out how do you segment. And so I would challenge us in healthcare that we need to roll back down to a particular product or a particular offering and segment on that and be very clear on what we're trying to accomplish in that piece. But the bigger challenge, and I'm going to do exactly what I said I don't want to do, which is roll back up to say just healthcare. We have in healthcare so many problems that it seems like the best approach is the peanut butter approach, where you take your bandwidth, you spread it across the whole organization and cross your fingers and hope you can just solve as many problems as you can. And we know that the peanut butter approach just doesn't work. And so I'm both agreeing with Zaina, and I'm saying we have to better prioritize and say, we're going to really solve this and solve it well, this particular challenge, but avoid this peanut butter approach and just say, we're going to try to fix healthcare, because that's a cluster bias to me.
Yeah, and I think that, and I love that perspective. I think, and those a bunch that are on here listening know that we spent the last 3 years working with Walmart, when they had made the statement that they wanted to democratize healthcare. And I remember when I first heard that, I'm like, what the hell is that? Like, how are we going to democratize healthcare? But in that thing, I think what Walmart learned and what they've done brilliantly is they did, because, and again, this goes back, I guess, to Zaina's point, they know their segmentation. Mm-hmm. They know who and where the dollar comes in that company. And when we started down that path, instead of using the peanut butter approach of we're going to fix healthcare for everybody, they went very specific to the segment that they knew was walking in their door and where they can make the most impact. And I think that was a big aha for me over the last 3 years. Is probably until then I probably had that, the whole cluster bias approach and the peanut butter approach. Well, we can fix healthcare. Well, can we? I love how you put it. Now I keep writing notes here because this is just fascinating to me. So Michael Harper says that he asking better questions. So I love this, and I think this is coming back to what you were starting on earlier. He says, I struggle with lazy questions from people who haven't taken time to thoughtfully craft what needs to be asked. Also, there's always a statement behind a question. How does biases play into our often unspoken statements that drive our questions? Nice and easy.
Ooh, yeah. Oh my!
You got
goodness.
Easy questions here today, Chris.
Yeah. So a couple things are coming to mind as you read this. One is that, and actually, I'm going to even take one more step back to Zaina's question about segmentation and this idea, and what I responded, which was about bandwidth. What I have seen over and over, at least in the world of healthcare innovation, is that time is so limited and precious that people in teams speed too quickly through the framing of the problem, and sometimes even the solution. So to your question, one piece is that I think it is best practice to test your research questions before you use them. And so that actually requires at least a two-step process, that you frame your questions, you test them with whatever population you're working with some people, and analyze whether or not your questions are triggering biases or you're just not getting the right kind of answers. almost always people just sprint right through and just use their questions. So I think that's one piece. And I'm just testing, can people hear me? Because I feel like we might be frozen. Oh no. Okay, I guess I'm going to keep going. I think we lost our hosts. So the second piece that I would say in the unspoken that your question referenced is your who you are when you show up and how you react and what you are projecting during these interviews, whether virtually, like right now I'm on the screen with you, or in person. And so I do think it takes some skill to ask questions and to hear and listen to answers. And we used to say, like, be careful how you breathe, because when someone's talking, your breathing can indicate confirmation or disgust with what they're saying. And so, like, really, I think we need to be almost meditative and let answers wash through us and try not to react. And so all of those unspoken gestures, our facial expressions, I think are really important to contain during asking questions, and more importantly, in listening to the answers.
This is Michael Hartford. I'm stepping in for Shawn until we get him back.
I had a panic moment. I was like, I'm alone here.
Well, and it was my question, so I'm thankful for having time for you to ask it, because I think maybe a lot of us struggle with the moving too quickly, or the not doing or taking too long, right? And is there a bias in both of them? And because Shawn's not here, I'm going to pick on him. You know, he's a move too fast. He's just get it done, make it happen, make it happen, make it happen, make it happen. I'm the one who puts on the brakes. I'm like, no, like, we have to vet this. He's like, well, vet faster. And I think that's a really helpful tension, right? And I've never thought of that before, of how bias could affect an output, you know, 2 months later.
Yeah.
Because 2 months before, one of our biases jumped in and caused trouble.
Yeah. I mean, I think, well, one, the tension you're describing, I love that tension. I think it drives great innovation work, is, you know, having somebody, polar opposites working together. And in some way, you know, my whole career, I've always had a strong partner who was so different from me, to challenge each other as we're doing the work. And I think for those of us who want to go a little bit slower and want to test a little bit more, I think it is our job to show why going slow for this piece actually speeds up outcomes, speeds up the overall work, improves efficacy overall in a reasonable amount of time. And those checks and balances need to be constrained and time bound. And so when we say, oh, I want to test this, or I want to try this out first, when working with a partner who wants to go fast, if we say, I need 4 months to do that, oh shit, I mean, that's going to be like, yeah, not going to fly. But give me 3 days or give me 2 days and let me just do some quick tests of this. Often that's good enough. It's not about perfection. It's just about getting some quick feedback before you move forward with your research plan or your first prototypes or whatever it is you're working on.
Yeah, that's huge. That's huge. All right. So next question. Well, I'm not even going to say that's huge. That's something I'm going to need to be thinking about the rest of the day. So thank you for it. So we're touching here on topics that can be seen from a systems perspective. Management has been resistant to positive change as the success shifted from bottom line thinking to new attention to a stakeholder relevance. We're overdue for a major shift to our humanity as a digital addiction has eroded soft skills, reasoning, creativity, and relationship values. Love to see your software as possibly a better option than the request I got from Salesforce to help them expand their value. I love that. As a design thinker, here's a question. As a design thinker, I design in both new requirements, triggers, and resistance factors. How does this relate to your approach or as an added value?
Can you read that question one more time?
Right. Yeah. As a design thinker, I design in both new requirements, triggers, and resistance factors. So how does this relate to your approach or as an added value? Looking at, especially from a digital perspective, where we've lost that human connection.
I'm just going to be honest, I'm not fully following the question. I'm going to assume that it has something to do with how are we using triggers for connection? Is that how you're reading it as well? Yeah.
In that maybe just, I mean, even just from a design systems perspective, right? How does bias play into triggers and how people resist change and how they navigate maybe even the results, right? The deliverables, the output. So maybe it's an input and output question, right? How does bias affect the input as well as bias affect the output?
Yeah. So I'm going to answer it the way I want to. I'm going to take you somewhere else. So one, it's really interesting. I just heard about this yesterday as one of my teams was reporting out on, I talked about the vaping cessation project we're working on. And they had talked about a trigger that is no longer effective, which is there's a lot of PSA announcements, public service announcements on quitting smoking and quitting vaping. And in the many young people that we have talked to who are contemplating or want to leave vaping behind, they are specifically untriggered by these PSA announcements that were supposed to trigger them. So I think it's an interesting example of how things evolve, and in some way, a sunk cost bias, I think, is there, that it may have worked at one point, but continuing to use something that is starting to no longer be effective or proven to be not effective, I think from my point of view, that's a sunk cost. So they built all these things and they're, damn it, I'm gonna use it and get it out into the world, and I don't care what the effect is at this point. So that was an aha for us, and it helped us learn what was no longer triggering, what was no longer effective, and ensuring how we might design triggers that are more relevant for right now. And for all intents and purposes, in 2 years from now, our triggers might be ineffective. And so I think this is a really important piece of the trigger puzzle when we think about behavior change, is that none of these things we discover are permanent. There are a lot of things that just kind of wash away over time, sometimes quickly, they spike, and then sometimes they last much longer, but it's rare that they last forever. And I think back to that first question about systemic solutions and about spreading things across healthcare organizations, we often design something and think we're done and move on to the next challenge. And instead, a lot of these designs and innovations need tune-ups. We need to rethink about the triggers and biases and see how they're changing over time, and re-release with next versions, better triggers and even less biases built into the products and services.
Absolutely. And we have time for one more question. And if I'm understanding this question correctly as well, that it's in that same construct of the system, and the question is, how well do you understand the full system that's driving change and system where the solutions? That enlightenment for me was key to a better future, and I think the answer is in there of yes, that's absolutely the key to a better future. But how does that look? And it's probably a good kind of place we could talk all day, right? But it's a good place to pause our conversation and hope we get to resume later, hopefully in person over a cocktail. But how does that full system as a factor of change affect everything that you're talking about?
Yeah, absolutely. So one thing I'm particularly proud about the organization that I'm in right now, Hopelab, we're a part of a family of organizations under the Omidyars, and they have a very strong point of view that systems thinking and systems change is fundamental. And so in the earlier work I referenced on connection in young people, that product called Nod, that body of work came out of a larger body of work. We did a full systems thinking approach to really try to understand what is happening in the mental health space for teenagers. And I don't want to say luxury, but I know in context to many of my colleagues, they would view it as a luxury. We had 6 months of systems thinking before we shifted into design. And so we mapped the whole system. We looked at the forces that were creating vicious and virtuous cycles of change, and chose the vicious cycle of disconnection inside of this larger map as our first effort to try to shift it from a vicious to a virtuous cycle. So that's only one piece of the puzzle, but it is a part of a systemic approach. I think it is important to take a systemic approach, or we're just throwing darts. We're throwing darts. We think this is the problem we should solve, and we work hard to solve it and do something good in that space. And sometimes that's the best we can do. So I'm not knocking all of us who do it that way. I sometimes do it that way. And we need to create leaders and systems and organizations that crave system understanding. And so I think that is really our next journey for many organizations. We are not there yet. I have not seen people say what I have done doesn't feel like a luxury to take 6 months to map the system. I don't think it's a luxury, but I know it feels that way for many people.
Right. And what is the tension on that journey? Right. If there are people who are like, get me out of this is wasting my time. And we have people saying, no, this is the best work we can do right now. And then you get into the soft skills that the question from earlier of, if we remove those soft skills, we remove the ability to interact in respectful ways and to be civil in our communication and to navigate conflict in helpful ways. But again, reframing it, bias is good, conflict can be good,
and always in service of doing the totality of the work faster and more effective with better outcomes. So we go slow, we introduce inefficiencies early on intentionally for greater efficiencies later. And I think that is some of the sophistication and innovation leadership that needs to be in place to make this all go.
Yeah, and you're getting some shout outs from Donna there of systems needs to be in the day-to-day, right? That like you're saying, it's not just as a design thinking mindset needs to infiltrate everything we do, so does a systems theory, right? We can keep talking about that. We had a conversation yesterday with a healthcare group that focuses on pediatric oncology and talking about the whole family system. It plays out in everything that we do. So, oh my goodness, thank you so much for this conversation and for piquing our interest in so many different ways. And I hope this leads to lots of good follow-up conversations for all of us, which is the whole point of the Disruptor League and what we're aiming to accomplish in this. And this is the last Disruptor Connection for 2020, but don't fear, we'll be back in 2021. We've got new guests, new connections, and stay informed with our Disruptor League newsletter. Also, if you haven't joined yet, Disruptor League Plus, we're soon will be announcing big stuff happening in 2021 that you're going to want to be a part of. And I will tip the hat to say that the Disruptor Connections will be a part of Disruptor League Plus, where it's going to be, most of them will be members only next year. So if you've enjoyed this, it's time to join us in a more significant way to really make this community come alive. So we look forward to building relationships, engaging in cutting edge programs, resources, and you even get to save money through some exclusive discounts. So looking forward to that in 2021, and so much good stuff that I know that all of us are just gearing up for. And right before you go, remember there's a survey that you're going to get when you sign out, and we really do pay attention to those responses, and they do help guide us. And it's so important right now, especially as we look at 2021. So please take the 15-20 seconds it takes to respond to those questions, and then we'll look forward to seeing everybody in 2021. Thank you so much.
Great. Thanks for having me. Happy holidays.